The hallway echoed with every slow step Lisa Carter took as she approached the principal's office. Her hands were clammy, clutching a thin piece of paper she hadn't dared unfold yet. Students hurried past, their laughter and chatter bouncing off the linoleum floors, oblivious to the weight of her footsteps. For the first time in 20 years of teaching, she felt a knot in her stomach, a mixture of dread, confusion, and disbelief. The dismissal letter in her hand, with the ink still fresh, seemed surreal. Outside the glass-paned door of the principal's office, Lisa paused. She glanced back toward her classroom, where faint outlines of her 7th-grade students were visible. Just an hour ago, she'd been helping them prepare for a history quiz, offering one of her classic pep talks about hard work and perseverance. Then came the call over the intercom, and everything unraveled. As she waited, her mind rewound to the incident that started it all, something so small and innocent that she hadn't imagined it could lead to this. It had been an ordinary Thursday morning. The weather was cold, and winter break was just around the corner. Her students shuffled into the classroom with red noses and thick coats, but her attention was immediately drawn to Jacob. Jacob Mitchell sat in the far corner of the room, quiet as usual. At 13, he was smaller than most of his classmates, a wiry boy with sandy blonde hair that hung in his eyes. He rarely spoke unless called upon, but Lisa had always noticed him, the way his shoulders curled inward, as if to make himself invisible, and how he always avoided eye contact when someone passed too close. That morning, however, she noticed something new. Jacob was walking strangely, almost limping. During the group activity, she casually approached his desk. "Jacob," she said softly, crouching beside him so the other students wouldn't hear, "are you okay? Is something wrong with your foot?" Jacob froze. He looked up briefly, startled, then shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'm fine." But Lisa saw it. His sneakers, dirty, torn at the seams, and far too thin for the season, were soaked through. The soles were peeling away, and his sock peeked out from a gaping hole near the toe. It broke her heart. For a moment, she thought of how her own teenage son, Danny, had a closet full of shoes, most of them barely worn. She glanced at Jacob again, who was fidgeting uncomfortably, trying to hide his feet beneath his desk. Lisa made up her mind that instant. The school day carried on, but Lisa's thoughts never strayed far from Jacob. During her lunch break, she quietly drove to a nearby department store. Her fingers traced through rows of sneakers before settling on a sturdy pair of black Nikes. They were simple, durable, and warm. She imagined Jacob's face when he saw them and smiled to herself. When she returned to school, Lisa tucked the shoebox into her bag, intending to give them to Jacob discreetly. After the final bell rang and most of the students had rushed off to buses and carpool lines, she called Jacob aside. He hesitated at the door, gripping the straps of his worn backpack tightly. "Jacob," Lisa began, her voice soft and gentle. "I noticed your shoes this morning. I hope you don't mind, but I thought these might help." She pulled the shoebox from her bag and held it out to him. Jacob stared at the box like it was something foreign, his eyes wide with shock. What is this?" he stammered. "Just a gift," Lisa said, smiling warmly. "Something to keep your feet warm this winter." For a moment, Jacob didn't move. Then his face crumbled. He looked up at her, his eyes glistening with tears. "But, why?" he whispered. "Because you matter, Jacob," Lisa replied simply. "And you deserve to feel comfortable." Slowly, he reached out and took the box, holding it as though it were made of glass. "Thank you," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. He looked at Lisa as if no one had ever done something like this for him before. "Go on," Lisa encouraged. "Try them on." Jacob sat down and gingerly pulled off his tattered sneakers. Lisa pretended not to notice the holes in his socks. When he slipped on the new shoes, his expression transformed completely. For the first time, Lisa saw a real smile, shy and hesitant but undeniably joyful. "They fit perfectly," he said quietly, his voice full of wonder. "I'm glad to hear that," Lisa said, standing up and brushing her hands together. "Now go catch your bus before it leaves you behind." Jacob grabbed his bag, clutching his old shoes like a treasure he couldn't bear to throw away. As he left, he turned back to look at her, his expression unreadable. "You're the best teacher," he said softly before disappearing into the hallway. The warmth of that moment carried Lisa through the evening, even as she graded papers late into the night. She thought nothing of it. To her, it was a small gesture, a simple act of kindness. She didn't expect gratitude or recognition, the smile on Jacob's face was reward enough. The next morning, however, everything changed. Lisa was halfway through her first class when the intercom crackled to life. "Ms. Carter, please report to the principal's office." The room fell silent. Students glanced at each other, then back at her. Lisa smiled reassuringly. "Carry on with your reading assignment," she said. "I'll be right back." When she arrived at Mr. Hayes's office, the principal was waiting behind his desk, his face set in a tight frown. A man in his 50s, Mr. Hayes was known for being strict, methodical, and humorless. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down, Lisa." She did, folding her hands in her lap. "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid a piece of paper across the desk. "Read this." Lisa picked it up, her brow furrowing as she scanned the text. Her heart dropped. Termination of employment. What? She looked up at him, stunned. "I don't understand. Did you buy shoes for a student yesterday?" Mr. Hayes asked sharply. Lisa blinked. "Yes, I did, but..." That was completely inappropriate, he cut her off. "Teachers are not to give gifts to students under any circumstances. It's against district policy. You know that." Lisa's mouth went dry. It was just a pair of shoes. Jacob's were falling apart. "That's not your concern," Mr. Hayes said coldly. "Boundaries exist for a reason. You crossed them." "Boundaries?" Lisa repeated, incredulous. "I bought a child shoes so he wouldn't freeze his feet walking to school." "How is that wrong?" Mr. Hayes's jaw tightened. "It's not up for debate. I've already informed the superintendent." Lisa's mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. Her entire career, 2 decades of dedication, of staying late to tutor struggling kids, of pouring her heart into her students, was being torn away because of a single act of kindness. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice trembling, "this is absurd. I won't accept this. You don't have a choice." Lisa stood, clutching the termination letter. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "One you'll regret." As she walked out of his office, the halls were eerily quiet. Her steps echoed like a drumbeat, and her vision blurred with unshed tears. Outside her classroom, a few students peeked out, whispering to each other. She forced a smile, even as her heart broke. When she reached her car, Lisa sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the paper in her hands. All she had wanted was to help a child. How had it come to this? And somewhere in the distance, the town unknowingly began to stir, because Lisa Carter's story was about to become far bigger than she could ever have imagined. Lisa sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. The silence outside felt deafening, the weight of the letter on her passenger seat impossible to ignore. The words, termination of employment, felt like an accusation, harsh and permanent. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, and as the initial shock faded, it was replaced by anger. How could doing something so good be treated as something so wrong? She looked out the window at the school she had given 2 decades of her life to, a place that was supposed to stand for education, kindness, and growth. And yet here she was, cast aside like a forgotten book on an old shelf. It wasn't long before her phone buzzed. Her son Danny's name lit up the screen. She hesitated, taking a deep breath before answering. "Hi, sweetheart. Mom? You okay? You never call during the day." "I'm fine," Lisa said quickly, her voice softer than she intended. "Just, something came up at work. I'll tell you about it when I get home." "You sure?" Danny pressed, his concern evident. "You sound weird." Lisa smiled faintly at his intuition. "I'm sure. I'll see you tonight." She hung up before her composure slipped, then stared down at her lap. Her mind raced with 100 different thoughts, but one question kept surfacing: how was she going to face her students? Her class was more than a job to her, it was her life's purpose. To know she wouldn't be there tomorrow, or ever again, was like a hole opening in her chest. Her train of thought was interrupted when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Rebecca Sanders, a fellow teacher and close friend. "What's going on? Rumors are flying already." Lisa sighed. Of course, the news had started to spread. In small towns like theirs, bad news always traveled at light speed, and anything remotely scandalous was twisted into something barely recognizable. By the time she pulled into her driveway, her anger had taken a back seat to exhaustion. She stepped inside her modest two-bedroom house, dropped her bag on the kitchen table, and sank into a chair. As she sat in the stillness of her home, she felt the heavy realization sink in: she was unemployed. How was she going to pay her bills? What about Danny's college fund? Every sacrifice she had made to ensure her son had a better life flashed through her mind like a cruel reminder of all that could unravel. The door opened, and Danny walked in, dropping his football gear by the door. "Mom? What happened?" he asked, his brow furrowed as he took in her expression. Lisa didn't know how to start, but she owed him the truth. "I lost my job," she said finally, the words tasting bitter. "They fired me." Danny blinked in disbelief. "What? Why?" Lisa hesitated, embarrassed by how absurd the situation was. "Because I bought a pair of shoes for a student who needed them." Danny froze, his expression shifting between confusion and anger. "Wait, they fired you for helping someone? That's insane." "Apparently, it's against school policy," Lisa said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "They said I overstepped boundaries." Danny shook his head in disbelief. "That's messed up, Mom. You've spent your whole life helping those kids, and they fire you over shoes?" Lisa smiled faintly, though her chest felt tight. "Sometimes life doesn't make sense, Danny." "Well, it's not fair," he shot back. "They can't get away with this." Lisa didn't respond. She wasn't in the mood to argue with the universe about fairness. Instead, she opened her laptop and began scanning job boards for teaching positions, though her heart wasn't in it. There were no immediate openings in town, and the thought of leaving her community made her stomach churn. She was too worn down to process the magnitude of it all. The next morning, Lisa woke to an unexpected knock on the door. She peered through the window and saw Rebecca standing on her porch, holding 2 cups of coffee. Lisa opened the door, forcing a smile. "You didn't have to come over." "Of course I did," Rebecca said, pushing past her and placing the coffee on the table. "Lisa, what the hell happened? Half the teachers are talking about it, but no one knows the full story." Lisa recounted the incident, how she had seen Jacob's shoes, how she couldn't bear to let the poor boy suffer through another cold day, and how Mr. Hayes had reacted. By the time she finished, Rebecca's face was flushed with anger. "Unbelievable," Rebecca said, shaking her head. "I always knew Hayes was rigid, but this? Firing you for showing compassion?" She paused, her voice softening. "How are you holding up?" Lisa let out a heavy breath. I'm managing. I don't have a choice. Rebecca sipped her coffee, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. You know, this isn't over. People need to hear about this. What do you mean? Lisa asked warily. I mean, this isn't just about you, Lisa. This is about what's right. You taught half the kids in this town. People need to know how you were treated. I don't want attention, Lisa said quickly. I just want to move on. Rebecca tilted her head. Lisa, what happens to the next teacher who tries to help a student? Or the next kid who goes without because people are too scared to cross boundaries? You've always been the first to stand up for those kids. Don't stop now. Lisa didn't respond, but Rebecca's words lingered long after she left. That evening, as Lisa sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through news headlines and drowning in uncertainty, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated but answered. Hello? Is this Lisa Carter? A deep male voice asked. Yes. Who is this? This is Mark Willis from Channel 5 News. I wanted to speak to you about your recent termination. Several parents have contacted us, and we'd like to share your story. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm interested in. Ms. Carter, the reporter interrupted, his tone kind but firm, this isn't just about you. The people in this town care about what happened. They believe you were treated unfairly. Wouldn't you like to set the record straight? Lisa's hand trembled slightly as she held the phone to her ear. A dozen conflicting thoughts ran through her mind, but one stood out. If I stay silent, will things ever change? Let me think about it, she said finally before hanging up. That night, Lisa lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Jacob, about his face when he'd slipped on those new shoes. She thought about the years she had spent pouring her soul into her students, believing that kindness could make the world a little brighter. And she thought about the principal's words, you crossed boundaries. Where were the boundaries of compassion? Who decided that rules mattered more than people? The following morning, Lisa stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down her hair and straightening her blouse. Danny leaned against the doorframe, watching her. You going somewhere? Lisa turned, her expression resolute. I'm going to the news station. Danny grinned, pride flickering in his eyes. Good for you, Mom. As Lisa grabbed her keys and walked out the door, she felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in days. It was resolve, the quiet strength that had carried her through decades of teaching. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain, her story wasn't over yet. And the small town where nothing ever. Lisa gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove toward the local news station. The weight of the decision hung over her like a heavy fog. She had always been the kind of person who worked quietly behind the scenes, never seeking recognition or attention. But this was different. This time, it wasn't about her, it was about Jacob, about the dozens of students like him who slipped through the cracks, and about standing up to a system that had lost sight of what really mattered. The small, boxy building that housed Channel 5 News sat on the edge of town, its weathered sign standing as a reminder that even local stations could make waves when they told the right story. Lisa sat in her car for a moment before finally stepping out, brushing imaginary lint from her slacks as if to steel her nerves. The receptionist, a young woman with bright red glasses, smiled kindly when Lisa gave her name. They're expecting you, Miss Carter. Mark Willis will meet you in the conference room. Lisa followed her down a narrow hallway, her shoes clicking on the polished floors. Mark Willis was already waiting, tall, sharply dressed, and exuding a calm authority that immediately put her at ease. Miss Carter, he said warmly, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us. I'm not sure I'm ready for this, Lisa admitted, shaking his hand as she sat across from him. I'm not used to all of this. Mark offered an understanding smile. I get it. But sometimes people need to hear stories like yours to remember what really matters. If you're ready, let's talk. The cameras weren't rolling yet, but Lisa already felt the heat of the spotlight. Mark began gently, asking her to explain her role as a teacher and why she had chosen this path. Talking about her career came easily. Lisa spoke about her love for teaching, how she saw herself not just as an educator but as a guide, a mentor, someone who could shape the next generation. She described the joy she found in seeing students succeed and the heartbreak she felt when they struggled. Then Mark leaned forward, his tone shifting slightly. "Tell me about Jacob. What happened that day?" Lisa's voice softened. It was freezing that morning. Most of the kids were bundled up in coats and boots, but Jacob, he was walking like his feet hurt. I saw his shoes, they were falling apart. You could see through the holes to his socks. I've been a teacher for a long time, and I've seen kids go without, but it never gets easier. You can't look away. Danny grinned, pride flickering in his eyes. Good for you, Mom. As Lisa grabbed her keys and walked out the door, she felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in days. It was resolve, the quiet strength that had carried her through decades of teaching. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: her story wasn't over yet. And the small town where nothing ever. Lisa gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove toward the local news station. The weight of the decision hung over her like a heavy fog. She had always been the kind of person who worked quietly behind the scenes, never seeking recognition or attention. But this was different. This time, it wasn't about her, it was about Jacob, about the dozens of students like him who slipped through the cracks, and about standing up to a system that had lost sight of what really mattered. The small, boxy building that housed Channel 5 News sat on the edge of town, its weathered sign standing as a reminder that even local stations could make waves when they told the right story. Lisa sat in her car for a moment before finally stepping out, brushing imaginary lint from her slacks as if to steel her nerves. The receptionist, a young woman with bright red glasses, smiled kindly when Lisa gave her name. "They're expecting you, Miss Carter. Mark Willis will meet you in the conference room." Lisa followed her down a narrow hallway, her shoes clicking on the polished floors. Mark Willis was already waiting, tall, sharply dressed, and exuding a calm authority that immediately put her at ease. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us." "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," Lisa admitted, shaking his hand as she sat across from him. "I'm not used to all of this." Mark offered an understanding smile. "I get it. But sometimes people need to hear stories like yours to remember what really matters. If you're ready, let's talk." The cameras weren't rolling yet, but Lisa already felt the heat of the spotlight. Mark began gently, asking her to explain her role as a teacher and why she had chosen this path. Talking about her career came easily. Lisa spoke about her love for teaching, how she saw herself not just as an educator but as a guide, a mentor, someone who could shape the next generation. She described the joy she found in seeing students succeed and the heartbreak she felt when they struggled. Then Mark leaned forward, his tone shifting slightly. "Tell me about Jacob. What happened that day?" Lisa's voice softened. It was freezing that morning. Most of the kids were bundled up in coats and boots, but Jacob, he was walking like his feet hurt. I saw his shoes, they were falling apart. You could see through the holes to his socks. I've been a teacher for a long time, and I've seen kids go without, but it never gets easier. You can't look away. So you bought him new shoes? Yes, Lisa said simply. It wasn't much. Just a pair of sneakers. But you should have seen his face, he looked so happy, so grateful. It was like no one had ever done something kind for him before. Mark nodded, his expression neutral but his eyes intense. And then you were fired. Lisa swallowed hard, the memory still fresh. Yes. Mr. Hayes called it overstepping boundaries. He said I had no right to interfere in a student's personal life, that I was showing favoritism. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. But it wasn't favoritism. It was kindness. It was humanity. The room was quiet for a moment. Mark let her words hang in the air before speaking. And how has the community reacted? Lisa sighed. It's been mixed. Some people are supportive. They've reached out to tell me they understand why I did what I did. Others, well, they say rules are rules, and I should have followed them. It's been hard. I've dedicated my life to that school, to those kids, and to lose it all over something so small, she trailed off, blinking back the tears that threatened to fall. Mark leaned back in his chair. Lisa, what would you say to those people who think you were wrong? Lisa met his gaze, her voice steady now. I'd say sometimes the rules need to be broken. When a child is suffering, when someone needs help, you don't turn away because of a policy. You do what's right. That's what we're supposed to teach these kids, not just math and science, but empathy, compassion, courage. If we don't live those values, how can we expect them to? The interview ended soon after, and as Lisa walked out of the building, she felt lighter somehow, as though she'd unloaded a burden she didn't even realize she was carrying. Still, she had no idea how far her story would spread or how quickly things would escalate. That evening, as Lisa sat on her couch grading some of Danny's schoolwork, her phone began buzzing non-stop. At first, she ignored it, assuming it was more texts from Rebecca or other concerned friends. But when Danny walked in holding his phone with wide eyes, Lisa looked up. Mom, you're all over the internet. What are you talking about? Lisa frowned, grabbing her phone. Your interview, it's gone viral. Danny said excitedly. Someone shared it on Facebook, and now it's everywhere. Lisa's heart skipped a beat as she opened her social media apps. Sure enough, her face was plastered across posts and headlines. Local teacher fired for helping student, community outraged. People were sharing the interview, leaving comments of support and anger toward the school. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some from parents she hadn't spoken to in years, others from complete strangers who had seen her story online. One comment stood out in particular: what kind of school fires a teacher for helping a kid? This is unbelievable. #Justice for Lisa. Lisa put the phone down, overwhelmed. I didn't expect this, she whispered. Danny grinned. This is good, Mom. People are on your side. Maybe this will change things. Over the next few days, the story spread like wildfire. News outlets from neighboring cities picked it up, and it wasn't long before it made national headlines. Lisa's quiet little town became the center of a larger conversation about kindness, bureaucracy, and what it really meant to be an educator. The attention wasn't entirely positive. Lisa received messages of hate as well, comments from people who accused her of seeking attention, of trying to play the victim. It stung, but for every cruel remark, there were 10 others full of support and encouragement. Parents shared stories of their own children being helped by compassionate teachers. Former students reached out to thank Lisa for the impact she had on their lives. One night, as Lisa sat reading through the messages, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated but answered. Hello? Is this Lisa Carter? A deep voice asked. Yes, Lisa replied cautiously. My name is Jonathan Anderson. I'm a philanthropist and entrepreneur. I saw your story online, and I wanted to reach out personally. Lisa froze. I'm sorry, what? Jonathan chuckled. I know this might be surprising, but I just wanted to say how much I admire what you did. It's rare to see people who put kindness above rules these days, and I think you deserve more recognition than you've gotten. Thank you, Lisa said, still stunned. That means a lot. Jonathan's tone turned serious. I want to help, Lisa. I'd like to set up a scholarship in Jacob's name to help other kids like him. And I'd like to make a donation to improve conditions at your school. Lisa's eyes widened. You want to do what? And one more thing, Jonathan continued. I'd like to talk to you about how we can support teachers like yourself, teachers who go above and beyond. People need to hear stories like yours. The world needs more people like you, Lisa. Lisa was speechless. She had spent the past week feeling as though the ground had been pulled out from under her, but now, here was this stranger, this powerful man, offering not just support but real change. I don't know what to say, she managed finally. Say yes, Jonathan said simply. And let's make something good come from all of this. Lisa sank back into her chair, her heart pounding. For the first time since that fateful day in Mr. Hayes's office, she felt like the tides were turning. The story wasn't over, not yet. And something told her that this was only the beginning. Lisa sat at her kitchen table long after the call with Jonathan Anderson ended, staring blankly at the steam rising from her half-empty mug of tea. Her mind felt like a tangled mess of thoughts and emotions, gratitude, disbelief, and a quiet but insistent voice that whispered, "Why me?" A billionaire she'd never met had just offered to change everything, Jacob's future, the school's conditions, and even the way the world looked at teachers like her. It all felt surreal. Too big. Too much. She'd spent the last few weeks being pulled into a storm she never wanted, and now it felt like she was drifting into even deeper waters. The next morning, Lisa awoke to a world that seemed different, though nothing outside her window had changed. The early winter sun bathed the small town in golden light, but the quiet was short-lived. Her phone buzzed endlessly, calls, texts, and emails piling up like an avalanche. Reporters from national networks wanted interviews. Friends from college she hadn't spoken to in years were messaging to say they'd seen her story on the news. Parents of former students left long, heartfelt notes, reminding her how much she'd meant to their children. But amid the outpouring of support, there was something else. The school board had called for an emergency meeting. Lisa's heart sank when she read the email. Though the message was vague, the weight of it was clear. Her situation had spiraled into something bigger than a single act of kindness. The town, the school district, and even the local government were suddenly under scrutiny. She'd heard whispers that Jacob's family had spoken to a lawyer, pushing back against the treatment he and Lisa had endured. The school administration, blindsided by the backlash, was scrambling for damage control. As Lisa walked through the familiar school gates later that afternoon for the meeting, she couldn't help but feel a mix of dread and defiance. Parents, students, and teachers stood in clusters outside the building, murmuring in low voices. When they spotted her, the hum of conversation grew louder. Some faces lit up with smiles and nods of encouragement. Others turned away, their expressions colder, distant. "Ms. Carter." A young voice called out. Lisa turned to see Jacob standing with his mother near the flagpole. The boy was wearing his new sneakers, the same ones that had sparked the entire ordeal. His mother, a thin woman with tired eyes and a warm smile, approached Lisa quickly. "Ms. Carter, I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice firm with emotion. "What you did for Jacob, no one's ever cared that much before. I don't care what anyone says, you're a good person, and you did the right thing." Lisa smiled, her throat tight. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Jacob looked up at her, clutching his mother's hand. "I'm sorry you got in trouble because of me," he said quietly. Lisa crouched down to his level, meeting his worried gaze. "Hey," she said softly, "this wasn't your fault. Don't ever feel bad for being cared about, okay?" The boy nodded, and Lisa gave him a reassuring smile before straightening and heading inside. The school auditorium was already packed when she arrived. Parents filled the folding chairs, teachers stood pressed against the walls, and members of the school board sat stiffly at a long table near the stage. Mr. Hayes sat in the middle, his jaw tight and his expression unreadable. "Ms. Carter," a board member called, gesturing for her to take a seat near the front. Lisa nodded and sat down, feeling the eyes of the room on her. She could hear snippets of whispered conversations behind her. "She's a hero, it's policy, though, they'll have to do something." The meeting began, and the superintendent, a tall woman with a practiced calmness, rose to speak. "We are here today to address the recent situation involving Ms. Lisa Carter and her termination from West Ridge Middle School." She paused, looking at the crowd. "This incident has sparked a national conversation about teacher conduct, school policies, and how we as educators can better serve our students." Lisa shifted in her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She noticed Mr. Hayes stiffen at the superintendent's choice of words. There was no mention of boundaries or rules, only a focus on what had gone wrong. The superintendent continued. "Before we proceed, we'd like to hear from Ms. Carter herself. Ms. Carter, would you like to say a few words?" The room fell silent. Lisa's pulse quickened as she stood up, her legs feeling shaky. She turned to face the audience, scanning the familiar faces. Students' parents. Teachers she'd worked alongside for years. People she'd passed in grocery store aisles and at football games. She cleared her throat. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I've been a teacher at this school for over 20 years. I have loved my job, my students, and this community more than I can say. I never imagined I'd be standing here, defending myself for trying to help a child." The murmurs grew louder, but Lisa pressed on. "That day, I saw Jacob walking to his desk, limping because his shoes were falling apart. I bought him a new pair of sneakers because I couldn't bear the thought of him suffering. I didn't think about policies or consequences, I thought about what was right." She paused, looking at the board members and then directly at Mr. Hayes. "I know we need rules in schools. I respect those rules. But when did kindness become something we have to defend? When did doing the right thing become a punishable offense?" The room was utterly still, every word landing like a stone in a pond. Lisa's voice softened. "I didn't buy Jacob those shoes for praise. I did it because he needed them. And I'd do it again." There was a beat of silence, and then someone began to clap. It started slowly, one person, then another. Soon, the entire room erupted into applause. Parents stood up, cheering. Teachers clapped loudly from the back. Even Jacob's mother was wiping tears from her face as she clapped her hands together. Mr. Hayes, still seated stiffly, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. He glanced nervously at the board members, who exchanged meaningful looks. The superintendent raised her hand for quiet, though her expression was unmistakably pleased. "Thank you, Ms. Carter," she said warmly. "We appreciate your honesty and dedication to your students. The board will deliberate and make a final decision shortly." Lisa sat back down, her heart pounding. Danny, who had snuck into the meeting without her noticing, gave her a thumbs up from the doorway. She smiled faintly, though she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The board members rose and disappeared into a side room, leaving the audience to buzz with speculation. Lisa waited, her hands trembling slightly, unsure of what the outcome would be. When the board returned 20 minutes later, the superintendent stood once again. "After careful consideration, the school board has decided to rescind Ms. Carter's termination. Effective immediately, she is reinstated to her position." The room exploded into cheers. Lisa blinked in disbelief, her chest heaving with a mix of relief and overwhelming emotion. People around her were hugging, shouting her name, and offering congratulations. Jacob's mother rushed forward, pulling Lisa into a tight embrace. "You did it," she cried. "You're back where you belong." As the applause continued, Lisa sat down, letting the moment wash over her. She caught sight of Mr. Hayes leaving the auditorium, his shoulders hunched and his face pale. For the first time, it wasn't his voice that mattered, it was the voice of the people, the voice of reason and compassion. That night, Lisa stood on her porch, looking out at the darkened town she loved so much. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan Anderson, "Congratulations. Let's talk about next steps. This is only the beginning." Lisa smiled as she looked at the message, feeling a quiet sense of victory. She had fought for what was right, and the world had listened. But somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't just about her. It was about every teacher, every student, and every act of kindness that made the world a better place. And she was ready to keep fighting for it. Lisa sat on her front porch the following morning, sipping coffee as the early sun crept over the horizon, turning the sky into a wash of gold and pink. She hadn't slept much. The weight of the previous day still hung heavily on her shoulders, though now it felt different, lighter somehow, like a burden that had finally been shared with others. The cheers, the applause, the hugs, they had surprised her, but they had also reminded her that she wasn't alone. People still cared about what was right. And for the first time in weeks, Lisa felt like herself again. The screen door creaked open, and Danny stepped outside, holding his phone. "Mom, you're still trending online," he said with a grin, flopping onto the porch step. "Everyone's talking about you. Some guy even made a video calling you the Teacher of the Year." Lisa raised an eyebrow, hiding a small smile behind her mug. "Is that so? I'm not sure the school board would agree with that title." Danny laughed. "Well, they're outnumbered. Look." He handed her his phone, and Lisa scrolled through comment after comment. People from all over the country, and even overseas, were sharing her story. Some posted about similar experiences with schools and policies, others simply thanked her for reminding the world what kindness looked like. One comment caught her eye: "Teachers like Ms. Carter are the real heroes. We need more people like her in the world." Lisa felt a swell of warmth, but there was also a gnawing realization that this wasn't over. Being reinstated was only the beginning. She knew she couldn't let things return to business as usual. There were still cracks in the system, so many Jacobs, so many unspoken stories. And what about the teachers who were too afraid to speak up? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the front door. Lisa turned, exchanging a curious glance with Danny. "Expecting someone?" "Nope," he said, shrugging. Lisa rose to answer the door and was startled to find two strangers standing on her front porch, a tall woman in a navy blue suit with a warm smile, and a shorter man holding a notepad. The woman extended her hand. "Ms. Carter, I'm Evelyn Martin with the National Educators Association. This is Robert Hayes, one of our program coordinators. May we come in?" Lisa blinked, surprised. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. Once seated in her living room, Evelyn set her briefcase down and clasped her hands together. "Let me get right to the point, Ms. Carter. We saw your story. The entire country saw your story, and it struck a chord, because what you did reminded people why education matters. It's not just about policies and procedures, it's about people. It's about compassion." Lisa nodded, unsure where this was going. "I appreciate that, but I'm just a teacher. I was doing what I thought was right." "That's exactly why we're here," Evelyn said, her smile widening. "We'd like you to speak at our upcoming national conference on education reform." Lisa froze. "Speak?" "Yes. Share your story. Talk about what happened to you, about Jacob, and about what needs to change. Teachers across the country are dealing with similar struggles, caught between the rules and their conscience. Your voice could inspire them to take action." Lisa swallowed hard. The idea of standing on a stage, speaking to thousands of people, made her palms sweat. "I don't know. I'm not a public speaker. I've never done anything like that. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Lisa, people are listening to you. Whether you wanted it or not, your story started a movement. You have the chance to make a real difference, not just in this town, but nationwide. Robert chimed in. We're also working with several lawmakers who are considering proposals for teacher protections and reforms to outdated policies. Your perspective would be invaluable. Lisa's head spun as she processed their words. A movement? Lawmakers? She had spent her entire life in this small town, teaching in the same school, walking the same hallways. And now people were asking her to take on a role she'd never imagined for herself. I don't know if I'm the right person for this, she said finally. I'm just, me. Evelyn smiled. That's exactly why you are the right person. After they left, Lisa sat on the couch, staring at the empty spot where Evelyn's briefcase had been. Danny walked in and flopped onto the armchair, grinning. National conference, huh? You're a big deal now. I'm not a big deal, Lisa said quickly, shaking her head. I'm just making a difference, Danny finished for her. Mom, you always tell me that courage isn't about being unafraid, it's about doing what's right even when you're scared. Isn't this one of those moments? Lisa looked at her son, his face so open and full of pride, and she knew he was right. She couldn't back down now. The world needed to hear what she had to say, not just for herself, but for every teacher, every student, and every quiet act of kindness that went unnoticed. The following weeks were a blur. Lisa spent hours drafting and redrafting her speech, practicing in front of the mirror until the words felt natural. Jonathan Anderson reached out again, offering his support and inviting her to meet with a team of education advocates he funded. You're not alone in this fight, he told her over the phone. Change starts with people like you. When the day of the conference finally arrived, Lisa found herself backstage at a massive convention center in Chicago. Thousands of educators, policymakers, and journalists filled the room beyond the curtain, their voices a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Lisa's nerves were frayed, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her note cards. You're going to do great, Mom, Danny said, squeezing her shoulder. He had insisted on coming with her, and seeing his face gave her strength. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. Please welcome to the stage Lisa Carter. Lisa took a deep breath, smoothing down her blouse as she stepped into the spotlight. The crowd erupted into applause as she approached the podium. The bright lights made it hard to see their faces, but she could feel their energy, curiosity, expectation, hope. She set her note cards down, gripping the edges of the podium as she began to speak. Thank you, she said, her voice steady but soft. I'm Lisa Carter, and I've been a teacher for over 20 years. I didn't come here today because I wanted attention. I didn't come here to be a hero. I came here because I bought a child a pair of shoes. The room fell silent as she told her story, about Jacob, about the school's response, about the overwhelming support and criticism she'd received. She spoke about the moment she realized how many other teachers had been forced to choose between following the rules and following their hearts. I know policies are important, Lisa said, her voice growing stronger. But policies are not more important than people. Rules are not more important than doing what's right. If we teach our children kindness and empathy but refuse to practice it ourselves, what are we teaching them? She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Teachers are the backbone of our communities. We fight for our students every single day, often with little support and even less recognition. But we keep going because we believe in them. We believe in their futures. And we will never stop fighting for what they need. Never about her. It was about all of them. As she walked off the stage, Danny was waiting with a wide grin. Told you you'd be awesome, he said, pulling her into a hug. Lisa laughed, tears in her eyes. "You were right. This is just the beginning." And it was. The ripple Lisa had started in a small town grew into waves that swept across the nation. Schools re-evaluated their policies. Teachers shared their own stories. And a simple pair of shoes became a symbol of something greater, a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, could change the world. The Carter Foundation for Compassionate Education grew faster than anyone anticipated. Within months, it had become a household name, spreading its mission to schools across the country. Lisa Carter found herself at the center of it all, a role she never sought but had grown into with quiet strength and unwavering determination. What had begun as a simple gesture, buying a pair of shoes for a boy in need, had ignited a movement that was now changing lives on a national scale. In a brightly lit office space in Chicago, Lisa sat in the foundation's new headquarters, surrounded by stacks of letters, donation records, and proposals. The office buzzed with activity, staff members typing furiously at computers, volunteers packing boxes of supplies, and phones ringing non-stop. Lisa had relocated temporarily to oversee the foundation's growth, though she still returned to her small town as often as she could. She missed the quiet hum of her classroom, the chalkboard smudged with math equations, and the small voices calling out, "Ms. Carter," as she walked into the room. This new life felt big and loud, but deep down, she knew it was necessary. Jonathan Anderson was there with her that morning, pacing as he discussed the foundation's next big initiative. "We've partnered with over 400 schools already," he said, excitement threading through his voice. "But I want to expand it further, bring in mentorship programs, teacher support grants, and more scholarships. We're just scratching the surface here." Lisa nodded, scribbling notes in a leather-bound journal she now carried everywhere. "We need to make sure the teachers know they're not alone," she said thoughtfully. "They're still afraid. Afraid of breaking rules, of losing their jobs. They need to know that compassion isn't something to hide." Jonathan's expression softened. "That's why you're so important, Lisa. You're living proof that one person can make a difference. You're inspiring people every day." Lisa glanced out the window at the busy streets below, where cars rushed past and people hurried through their lives. Sometimes she still marveled at how her world had changed so completely. A year ago, she'd been in her classroom, quietly grading papers, oblivious to the storm that was about to unfold. Now, she was overseeing a nationwide operation, her name synonymous with compassion and change. Later that afternoon, Lisa joined a video conference with a group of teachers from a rural district in Oklahoma. They looked tired and overworked, their faces shadowed with stress, but their eyes held something she recognized: hope. "Ms. Carter," one teacher said, her voice cracking. "Thank you for what you're doing. We've been struggling for years. It feels like we've been fighting a losing battle, but seeing what you've accomplished, it reminds us why we're here." Lisa smiled gently. "It's not just me. It's all of you. You're the ones in the classrooms every day, making a difference. We're just giving you the tools to keep going." The teacher wiped at her eyes and nodded. "It's nice to know someone's finally fighting for us." When the call ended, Lisa leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. This was why she kept going, why the long hours and constant travel were worth it. The foundation wasn't just about helping students like Jacob, it was about empowering teachers to do what they had always done: care. That evening, Lisa returned to her rented apartment, where Danny was waiting with takeout spread across the tiny kitchen table. He had taken a gap year from college to help his mom during the foundation's early days, and Lisa couldn't have been prouder of the young man he was becoming. "How was today?" Danny asked, passing her a container of noodles. "Busy," Lisa said with a tired smile. "But good. Really good. I spoke to a group of teachers who reminded me why we're doing all of this." Danny grinned. "You're unstoppable, Mom. Pretty soon, they'll be naming schools after you." Lisa laughed, shaking her head. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. As they ate, Danny pulled out his phone and scrolled through the Foundation's social media page. Look at this, he said, showing her a video. It was a clip of a high school assembly where students were presenting new backpacks, shoes, and supplies to their classmates. This is one of the schools we partnered with last month. They're calling it Carter Day, a day to focus on kindness. Lisa watched the video in awe. Students cheered as the principal handed out items, their faces lit with excitement and gratitude. One little girl hugged a pair of new shoes tightly to her chest, as if they were the most precious thing in the world. Lisa felt her throat tighten as she realized just how far the Foundation's work had spread. Carter Day, she repeated softly. Who would have thought? Danny smiled. It's more than just a day, Mom. It's a movement. Lisa didn't respond, but her heart swelled with pride. It was moments like this that made all the struggles, all the doubts, and all the sleepless nights worth it. She thought of Jacob and wondered if he knew just how much he had inspired, how his quiet need had sparked something so much larger than both of them. A few days later, Lisa received a handwritten letter at the Foundation's office. The envelope was worn and smudged, the handwriting familiar yet unexpected. She opened it slowly, her heart racing as she unfolded the paper. Dear Ms. Carter. I hope you're doing well. My mom showed me everything that's been happening. I can't believe it all started because of those shoes. I still wear them, even though they're getting old now. I just wanted to say thank you again. You didn't just help me, you showed me that people care. I don't feel invisible anymore. I'm working hard in school, and I'm going to do something big one day, just like you did. You're my hero. Your student. Jacob. Tears streamed down Lisa's face as she read the letter. She held it against her chest for a moment, letting the words sink in. You're my hero. She thought back to that freezing day in her classroom, when she had simply wanted to ease one child's suffering. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined it would lead to this. That evening, Jonathan called with news that left her speechless. Lisa, you've been nominated for the National Teacher of the Year award, he said, his voice brimming with pride. Lisa sat in stunned silence. Teacher of the Year? I'm not even teaching anymore, Jonathan. I'm running a foundation. That's where you're wrong, Jonathan replied. You're teaching the world what compassion looks like. You're teaching educators that kindness isn't weakness. And you're teaching kids like Jacob that someone will always stand up for them. The award ceremony was held in Washington, D.C., months later, in a grand hall filled with teachers, dignitaries, and education leaders from across the country. Lisa sat in the audience, humbled by the stories of the other nominees, teachers who had worked tirelessly to change lives in their own communities. When her name was called, she walked to the stage, the applause ringing in her ears. Standing at the podium, Lisa took a deep breath. Thank you, she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. This isn't an award for me. It's an award for every teacher who has ever faced a choice between following the rules and following their heart. It's for every student who has ever felt invisible, unheard, or unloved. And it's for every person who believes that kindness, no matter how small, can change the world. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding and cheering. Lisa stood there for a moment, taking it all in. When she returned home to her small town a week later, the entire community turned out to greet her. Parents, students, and neighbors lined the streets, holding signs that read, "Welcome home, Ms. Carter," and "Our hero." Jacob was there with his mother, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Lisa hugged him tightly, her voice soft as she said, "This is all because of you, Jacob. Never forget that." The boy smiled, his eyes bright. "You're the one who showed me it's okay to ask for help." As Lisa looked out at the crowd of familiar faces, her heart swelled with gratitude. She had never wanted the spotlight, but she had learned something profound. the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. And for Lisa Carter, that was all the recognition she would ever need.